Well, it is a joy to be joined now by the CEO of Dow, Jim Fitterling, to talk about how, well, climate policy can be good for business, can be business-led in many ways. And Jim, welcome to the Bloomberg Green Summit. And to really start this discussion, I thought it would be wonderful to hear from the audience, basically, get them involved already, and remember to be on your social media and giving us questions live as you can. But a poll that we put to the audience ahead of this discussion was indeed that the private sector will need to take the lead in driving innovation in the fight against climate change. 3/4 of those that responded agreed with that statement. Just 25% thought that no, it will be perhaps public sector led, or indeed just not private sector. Jim, your take. Is it for business to lead in this transition, do you think?
Good morning, Caroline. Thanks for having me. And I do agree with that poll. I think the private sector is the lead, especially from a technology and innovation standpoint, to do what we want to do with decarbonizing emissions and getting the electricity and the energy sources decarbonized. I think we have to be in the lead. I don't think we're alone. It definitely requires private and public partnerships. So I don't think you want to say, boy, the private sector can do it on its own. And if you just look at the discussion around taxes, there's not enough tax in the world for private sector to pay for all of this. It's going to have to be a public-private partnership with some decent policies around a market-related price on carbon to help accelerate this transition, and without overly binding it with regulations that really drive you in the opposite direction.
Interesting. Let's dig in on two of those perspectives. I mean, one of them is what sort of policy you want to see. But firstly, the talk of a price on carbon, that's already being exercised in Europe. We actually see the price of carbon up about 40% of late, I think it is. People betting that it will go higher. But it is doing what it's meant to do. It's driving up the cost of more polluting energy sources. Do you think it realistically, a sort of carbon trading mechanism in the US or globally could be something that was accepted?
I think it has to be done globally because if we just follow Europe, you run the potential that the United States and Europe could make themselves uncompetitive as manufacturers, and they could drive all manufacturing to China, India, places that rely on coal and other forms of energy that would drive up greenhouse gas emissions. So you don't want to see that. And I think one of the challenges we've got is we've been trying to use trade to manage international policy. In this case, we've got one global platform, which is, get greenhouse gas emissions down, get CO2 emissions down, and that's a global playing field. And if we don't have everybody playing by those rules, which I think means a market-based price, then I think you're going to have trouble. If each government sets its own price, you're not going to have alignment or harmonization. And at that point, you're going to get into all kinds of other issues.
You wrote a very powerful statement at the beginning of the year in January, talking about the need to be bold, and it's Dow's moment to be bold about innovation, about investment in climate change, tackling climate change. Therefore, as an international business with, manufacturing and places of work, R&D, not just in the US, not just in Europe, but in Asia as well. How are you talking to members of government? Do you feel that that's a sort of private-public partnership that needs to be discussed globally? Is that something that you're trying to push, the carbon trading element?
I think there's
is it basically as a driver as well?
When we worked very hard with Columbia University, the Nature Conservancy, Ernst& Young, Dow, and launched a carbon reporting project. And basically, that's to take a look at the full life cycle carbon impact of different technologies. Today when we focus on emissions, we're focusing mostly on scope 1 and 2. But there's a life cycle analysis that needs to be done. Sometimes you can move down a path where you think you're making a big improvement on carbon, but you're just moving the carbon emissions somewhere else in the chain. And you need that full life cycle analysis to understand it. And they're not good systems to do it today. So we're going to embark on a project to be able to account for that, which we think is important to drive the markets and the investments in the markets and make it transparent. I think there's good agreement around how to measure scope 1 and 2. We signed on to the Task Force for Climate-Related Financial Disclosures, and next year we'll disclose our data under that premises. Up till now, we've been reporting under GRI, audited reports, and last year we included reporting under the SASB framework. And we're doing a lot internally, digitally, to be able to measure emissions and make that kind of accurate reporting much more robust. And I think you'll need that to either have a government-driven carbon tax or funding through a market-based price on carbon.
Quickly on that point, do you think the proceeds of the revenue, how would the proceeds, it's a question from the audience, if you would agree a meaningful carbon price, how do you see the proceeds of that revenue being allocated, do you think?
Infrastructure and research is what I would say. Those are the two things that we need the most of. If it's carbon capture, we need to build infrastructure to be able to do it. If it's new process technology, you need to incentivize the research to make it happen and make it more affordable, get yourself down the learning curve. And that works in almost every industry.
And Jim, we have about 20 seconds left, but I'll give you a bit longer than that. But how does this all make you feel? I know you as a man personally are so focused on the impact your business makes, on the social part of your business, on doing good business, governance as well. When you measure not just the levels 1 and 2, but scope 3 of the impact your business makes, how does it make you feel, and how determined does it make you?
It's very energizing. For me, it's energizing. I think for our whole employee base, it's energizing. I don't have any trouble getting employees to want to work on these projects. And I think we're scientists and engineers. These are the kinds of challenges. These are challenges just like putting a rover up on Mars and flying a helicopter on Mars. They're maybe not that daunting, So I think if we can bring it down to scale and say, what can we do, and what do we need to make this happen? That's what we need. I don't have time to get into a big public debate about whether doing all this is going to reduce climate change or not. I don't think that's the issue. Let's see what we can do to get CO2 emissions down. Let's focus on that and get all of our energy channeled into that. And I think we're doing a good job of getting out there and covering the whole range of things that we think could be done and could also be done within reason from an affordability and a reliability standpoint.